Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human warship Liberty's Edge, watching the burning wreckage of alien ships drift through space. The Zorathian Empire's fleet, once thought to be unstoppable, was now scattered debris floating in the darkness. 18 months ago, no one would have believed this was possible. Captain Lisa Stone walked up beside him, her face showing the exhaustion that came from months of constant fighting. She carried a data pad filled with reports from across the SD battle zone. "Sir, we're getting surrender signals from 12 more Zorothian vessels. Their commanders are asking for safe passage back to their home worlds." Morrison nodded slowly. 3 years ago, when the Zoethians first found Earth, they had demanded humanity's immediate surrender. The alien beings stood 8 feet tall, with bodies that looked like living crystal. Their weapons could turn mountains into glass, and their ships moved faster than anything humans had ever built. When Earth's leaders refused to bow down, the aliens attacked with the confidence of a species that had conquered half the galaxy. "Any word from Commander Black's squadron?" Morrison asked. Stone checked her pad. "They're finishing their sweep. Of the outer sectors, Ryan reports finding more abandoned Zorthian equipment. The aliens are leaving everything behind in their rush to escape." Morrison remembered the early days of the war when human ships were cobbled together from mining equipment and civilian transports. Earth's military had been pitifully small compared to the vast Zorthian armadas. But humans had something the aliens didn't understand. They could learn, adapt, and change their tactics faster than any species the Zorothians had ever encountered. The first major breakthrough came when human engineers examined captured Zorothian technology. While the alien weapons were incredibly advanced, they were also completely standardized. Every Zorthian ship was identical to every other ship of its class. Their battle formations never varied. Their tactics followed patterns that had worked for 1,000 years. Humans were different. When their first weapons failed to penetrate Zorothian shields, they built new ones. When their ships proved too slow, they stripped them down and rebuilt them faster. When conventional tactics failed, they threw out the rulebook and tried something completely new. "Commander." Ryan Black's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral, this is Black Squadron. We've secured the debris field. In Sector 7, you need to see what we found." "Go ahead, Ryan," Morrison replied. "Sir, we've recovered intact Zorothian power cores, shield generators, and weapon systems. Enough to outfit 20 more ships like the Liberty's Edge. But that's not the strange part. We found personal logs from the alien commanders. Calling us something in their language that translates to the impossible enemy." Stone raised an eyebrow. "Impossible?" Black continued. "According to these logs, the Zorothians have conquered over 300 worlds in the past millennium. They've never encountered a species that could reverse engineer their technology this quickly. They're saying it should take centuries, not months." Morrison smiled grimly. The aliens didn't understand human nature when faced with extinction. Humans didn't just fight harder, they fought smarter. Every captured piece of technology was immediately taken apart, studied, and improved upon. Human engineers didn't just copy Zorthian designs, they made them better. The ship's chief engineer, Katie Wells, joined them on the bridge. Her uniform was stained with grease, and her hands showed the burns that came from working with alien technology. "Admiral, I've got the new shield modifications ready for testing. We've increased power efficiency by 30% and added frequency randomization." "Frequency randomization?" Stone asked. Wells grinned. "Zorothian weapons are designed to overload specific shield frequencies. But if our shields constantly change frequency, their weapons can't lock on. It's like trying to hit a target that keeps moving to a new dimension." This was exactly what made humans so dangerous to the Zorathians. The aliens had spent centuries perfecting weapons designed to defeat known shield types. But humans kept inventing new shield types faster than the aliens could develop countermeasures. Morrison walked to the main view screen, showed the vast battlefield where the latest engagement had taken place. 43 Zorothian ships had attacked this system, expecting to find a small human outpost. Instead, they found a trap. Human vessels had been hidden in the asteroid field, their power signatures masked by specially designed cloaking devices. Built from salvaged alien technology, the battle had lasted only 4 hours. When it ended, 38 Zorothian ships were destroyed or captured. The remaining 5 had fled in panic, broadcasting warnings about human tactical unpredictability to any alien forces within range. Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker approached with the casualty reports. "Sir, we lost 2 fighters and had minor damage to 3 cruisers. Total human casualties are 7 wounded, none killed." The numbers were almost unbelievable. In the early days of the war, humans had lost entire fleets trying to damage a single Zorothian vessel. Now they were winning battles with minimal losses while facing superior numbers of enemy ships. "What's our status on the new construction?" Morrison asked. Parker consulted his datapad. "The asteroid shipyards have completed 12 new vessels this month. Each one incorporates lessons learned from the latest battles. The Defiant Dawn is ready for space trials, and Captain Davis is eager to take her out." The Defiant Dawn represented the latest evolution in human warship design, built entirely from captured Zorothian technology, but following human engineering principles. It was unlike anything that had ever existed in the galaxy, where alien ships followed standard designs that had remained unchanged for centuries. Human ships were unique creations tailored to specific missions and crews. Stone received another communication and listened to her earpiece. "Admiral L. Weir, getting reports from the outer colonies. 3 more star systems have declared independence from the Zorothian Empire. They're requesting human assistance in establishing their own defenses." This was perhaps the most unexpected development of the war. The Zorothian Empire controlled hundreds of worlds, keeping them in line through fear and superior firepower. But news of human victories was spreading throughout the galaxy. Subject species were beginning to wonder why they should continue serving their crystalline masters. Morrison nodded. "Send diplomatic teams to those systems. We'll provide technical assistance and training. But they need to understand that we're not looking to replace the Zorothians as galactic rulers. We want to help worlds govern themselves."
The communication.
System activated again, this time with an urgent message from Earth Command. "Admiral Morrison, this is General Collins. We've intercepted Zorothian military communications. Their High Council is calling for a complete strategic review. They're admitting that their initial assessment of human capabilities was entirely wrong." Morrison felt a surge of satisfaction. For 3 years, humans had been dismissed as a primitive species confined to a single star system. The Zorothians had expected to conquer Earth in a matter of weeks, then move on to more important targets. Instead, they had awakened something they couldn't understand or control. The aliens had made a fundamental error. They assumed that advanced technology alone determined military superiority. But humans had proven that adaptability, creativity, sheer determination could overcome almost any technological advantage. Every Zorothian weakness had been identified and exploited. Every human failure had become a learning opportunity. Wells approached with another report. "Admiral, our intelligence teams have analyzed the captured Zorothian databases. We now have complete technical specifications for their entire military infrastructure. Ship designs, weapon capabilities, shield, frequencies, even their tactical doctrines." Stone whistled softly. "That's everything we need to predict their next moves." "Better than that," Wells replied. "It's everything we need to stay ahead of them permanently. They can't change their fundamental technology base without rebuilding their entire civilization. But we can adapt our designs to counter anything they develop." Morrison looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed since the first Zorothian attack. Humanity had gone from facing extinction to becoming the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. The species that was supposed to be easily conquered had instead shattered the confidence of an empire that had ruled for 1,000 years. The war was far from over. But the momentum had shifted completely. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Nicole Davis gripped the command chair of the Defiant Dawn as her ship emerged from hyperspace into the Kepler system. 3 months had passed since Admiral Morrison's victory at the battle that changed everything. Now, Davis commanded A vessel that, according to every known law of galactic engineering, should not exist. The Defiant Dawn was built in the hidden asteroid shipyards that humans had carved out of space rocks floating in the outer rim of their solar system. While the Zerothians searched for Earth's main military bases, human engineers worked in secret locations that no alien scanner could detect. They took apart every piece of captured Zerothian technology and rebuilt it according to human principles. Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker stood at the engineering station, monitoring the ship's revolutionary defense systems. The shields that protected the Defiant Dawn were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where Zerothian energy barriers operated on fixed frequencies that had remained unchanged for centuries, human shields adapted and evolved in real time. During combat, Captain, we're detecting 43 Zerothian vessels in the system, reported Lieutenant Tony Hayes from the sensor station. They're arranged in standard attack formation around Kepler Station. Davis nodded. Zerothians still use the same battle tactics their ancestors had developed hundreds of years ago. Their ships moved in perfect geometric patterns. Their weapons fired in synchronized volleys. And their commanders followed strategies that had never failed them before meeting humans. But predictability had become their greatest weakness. Communications. Signal the rest of our fleet. 12 ships against 43. Time to show them what impossible looks like. The human fleet was small compared to the Zerothian armada, but each ship was unique. The Thunderstrike had been built for speed and stealth. The Iron Resolve carried the heaviest weapons humans had ever constructed. The Star Dancer could change its configuration during battle, transforming from a fighter to a bomber to a scout. Ship as needed. Chief Engineer Katie Wells monitored the fleet's performance from her station aboard the flagship. She had personally overseen the construction of every vessel in the human force. Unlike Zerothian ships, which were mass-produced, according to ancient blueprints, each human warship was custom-built for its specific crew and mission requirements. Captain, their lead vessels are moving to intercept, Parker reported. Standard Zerothian attack pattern 7. They're expecting us to retreat or request terms. Davis smiled. The aliens had no idea what they were facing. Human military doctrine had evolved far beyond the desperate improvisation of the early war months. What began as creative solutions to impossible problems had become a systematic approach to defeating superior enemies through superior thinking, Captain Alex Turner commanded. The Thunderstrike, leading the left wing of the human formation. His ship darted between asteroid clusters, using the cover to mask its approach. Zerothian sensors were designed to track conventional spacecraft following predictable flight paths. They had trouble detecting vessels that moved like fighter aircraft, weaving through obstacles and changing direction without warning. The battle began when the Zerothians opened fire with their standard opening volley. Massive energy beams that could destroy any known type of ship struck the human vessels. But instead of exploding, the human ships absorbed the attacks. Their adaptive shields analyzed the incoming energy, determined the frequency and power levels, then adjusted their defensive systems to neutralize the threat. Direct hit on the Iron Resolve, Hayes reported. No damage. Their shields are holding at full strength. The Zerothian commander, Admiral Kethver, stared at his tactical display in confusion. His weapons had just delivered enough firepower to destroy a battle cruiser, but the human ship continued to advance as if nothing had happened. This was impossible according to every principle of galactic warfare. Davis activated the fleet communication system. All ships execute pattern Omega. Show them what adaptive tactics look like. The human vessels broke formation and scattered in 12 different directions. Each ship followed a completely different strategy. Some attacked head-on with overwhelming firepower. Others circled around to strike from unexpected angles. A few disappeared entirely, using cloaking systems that rendered them invisible to Zerothian sensors. Captain Steve Miller piloted the Star Dancer through a maneuver that defied physics. His ship folded its wings, compressed its hull, and shot through a gap between two Zerothian vessels that was barely wide enough for a fighter. As he passed through, he released a spread of mines that exploded behind him, crippling both enemy ships. The Zerothians tried to respond with their standard counter-tactics. But human unpredictability made their strategies useless. Every time. The aliens adjusted their formation to counter one human attack. 3 more human ships would strike from completely different angles using entirely different weapons. Engineer. First Class Amy Rodriguez had designed the weapon systems for half the human fleet. Her hybrid designs combined Zorathian energy technology with human projectile weapons, creating guns that could fire both plasma bolts and physical ammunition. When alien shields adapted to stop one type of attack, the weapons would immediately switch to the other type. Captain, the Zorathian flagship is requesting communication, communications officer reported. Davis accepted the transmission. Admiral Kethfer appeared on the main screen, his crystalline features showing confusion and growing fear. Human Commander, your tactics violate established principles of space combat. Your weapons should not be able to penetrate our defenses. Your ships should not be able to maneuver in those patterns. Admiral Davis replied calmly, "You made the mistake of assuming we would fight according to your rules. Humans don't follow established principles when those principles don't work." The battle continued for 2 hours. Human ships darted through the Zorothian formation like schools of fish attacking a group of whales. They used the alien size and slow maneuverability against them, striking quickly and disappearing before the enemy could respond. When Zorathian vessels tried to pursue individual human ships, they found themselves separated from their formation and vulnerable to coordinated attacks. Lieutenant Commander Chris Adams commanded the engineering teams that kept the human ships running during the battle. His crews had trained for months to perform repairs and modifications while under fire. When a Zorathian weapon managed to damage a human vessel, the ship would retreat briefly, fix the problem, and return to battle stronger than before. The turning point came when Captain Turner's Thunderstrike managed to disable the Zorathian flagship's main engines. Admiral Kethfer found his massive vessel drifting helplessly, while human ships swarmed around it like angry insects. His crew reported that their weapons could not lock onto targets that moved so unpredictably. "Captain Davis," Turner's voice came over the communication system. "The enemy flagship is defenseless. Should we destroy it?" Davis considered the question. Destroying the Zorothian command ship would be a significant victory, but capturing it would be even better. "Negative. Board that vessel and take the Admiral prisoner. We need him alive." Human. Boarding parties use personal teleportation devices reverse-engineered from Zorothian technology. They appeared inside the alien ship wearing powered armor that combined the best features of both species' military equipment. Within minutes, they had secured the bridge and captured the enemy commander. The remaining Zorothian ships found themselves facing an impossible situation. Their leader was captured. Their tactics were useless, and the human fleet was systematically destroying them one by one. Ship after ship surrendered rather than face annihilation. When the battle ended, 38 Zorathian vessels had been destroyed or captured. The human fleet had suffered minor damage to 3 ships and no casualties. It was the most one-sided victory in the history of galactic warfare. Davis stood on the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, watching as her crews secured the captured alien ships. Each vessel would be studied, analyzed, and eventually converted into another unique human warship. The Zorothian technology would be improved, modified, and combined with human innovations to create something entirely new. Captain Parker reported, "We're receiving emergency transmissions from Zorathian High Command. They're ordering all remaining fleets to avoid engagement with human forces until further notice." The impossible had become routine. Species that had been unknown to the galaxy 3 years ago was now so feared that the mighty Zorathian Empire was ordering its fleets to run rather than fight. The hunters had become the hunted, and the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting with each human victory. Admiral Kethfer sat in the human detention facility, staring at the walls of his cell. He had spent his entire career studying the military tactics of dozens of conquered species. None of them had ever presented a challenge like humanity. Humans didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to learn, adapt, and become stronger. With each engagement, as news of the victory at Kepler Station spread throughout the galaxy, species that had lived under Zorathian rule for centuries began to whisper about the possibility of freedom. The impossible enemy had become something even more dangerous. They had become hope. Commander Steve Johnson stood in the main square of Christos 7, watching as thousands of alien workers gathered around the makeshift platform his diplomatic team had erected. The mining world had been under Zorathian control for over 200 years, but news of human victories was spreading faster than the Empire could contain it. The crowd consisted of dozens of different species, all of them forced to work in the crystal mines that powered Zorathian technology. There were the tall, thin Velkans with their blue skin and forearms, the short, stocky Braxons whose thick hides protected them from radiation. Even some Corvani, the peaceful traders who had been enslaved when they refused to hand over their navigation charts. Johnson activated the translation device that would allow every species present to understand his words. People of Christos 7, I bring news from the war front. 3 days ago, human forces defeated a Zorathian battle fleet of over 40 ships. The aliens who have ruled you for generations are not invincible. A murmur ran through the crowd. Most of these beings, the Zorathians, had seemed like gods of war. Their crystal ships could destroy planets, their weapons could level cities, their empires stretched across half the galaxy. The idea that any species could defeat them in open battle seemed impossible. Major Rachel Green monitored the situation from orbit aboard the human vessel, Freedom's Call. Her intelligence networks had spent months making contact with resistance movements across 12 different star systems. What they discovered was that the Zorathian Empire's control relied almost entirely on fear and the belief that resistance was hopeless. Commander Johnson. Green's voice came through his communication device. We're detecting Zorathian patrol ships approaching the system. You have maybe 20 minutes before they arrive. Johnson nodded and turned back to the crowd. I know this. It's hard to believe. Your people have suffered under Zorothian rule for generations. But I want you to see something. He activated a holographic projector that showed the battle at Kepler Station.
All the crowd watched in stunned silence.
Human ships systematically destroyed a much larger Zorathian fleet. They saw alien vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries burning in space, their crews surrendering to what the Zorathians had called a primitive species. A Velkan worker stepped forward, his forearms trembling with emotion. Human. Commander, is this real? Can your people truly defeat the Crystal Masters? It's real, Johnson replied. But more importantly, you can defeat them too. The Zorathians maintain control through fear, but fear only works when people believe they have no choice. You have a choice. Dr. Helen Wright worked in her laboratory aboard the human research vessel Discovery, analyzing data collected from dozens of Zorothian prisoners as humanity's chief expert on alien psychology. She had made a discovery that changed everything about how they understood their enemy. The Zorathians were not the military geniuses they appeared to be. Their society was built around rigid social classes that never changed. Warriors followed orders without question. Engineers built the same designs their ancestors had used for centuries. Commanders used tactics that were thousands of years old, because no one was allowed to suggest improvements. Wright's research showed that this inflexibility was the Zorothians' greatest weakness. They simply could not adapt to new situations or unexpected threats. When faced with human creativity and unpredictability, their entire military system began to break down. She transmitted her findings to Colonel Tony Miller, who was preparing to lead the first joint human-alien operation against a Zorathian stronghold. Miller's force included not just human soldiers, but also Velkan fighters who had abandoned their former masters and Braxton engineers who knew how to disable Zorothian equipment from the inside. Colonel Wright's voice came through the communication system. Remember that the Zorathians cannot think outside their established patterns. If you do something they don't expect, they won't know how to respond. Miller studied the tactical display showing the Zorothian fortress they were about to attack. The structure followed a standard defensive design that had been used throughout the Empire for centuries. Every entrance, every corridor, every defensive position was exactly where Zorathian military doctrine said it should be. That's their mistake. Miller said to his mixed force of human and alien soldiers. They built this fortress to defend against conventional attacks. We're going to give them something completely unconventional. The assault began when Braxton engineers used their knowledge of Zorathian systems to disable the fortress's early warning sensors. The aliens inside had no idea they were under attack until human soldiers were already moving through their corridors. But this wasn't a typical human assault. Miller's forces included Velkans who could fit through ventilation systems too small. For other species, Corvani who could hack alien computer systems using techniques the Zorathians had never encountered, and Braxtons whose natural armor allowed them to walk through defensive fields that would kill other beings. Captain Danny Ross led a squadron of human fighters that provided air support for the ground assault. His ships used captured Zorathian weapons modified with human improvements, and the fortress's defensive guns tried to shoot them down. They found that human pilots flew in patterns that their targeting systems couldn't track. The battle for the fortress lasted only 6 hours. When it ended, the Zorothian garrison had surrendered without destroying their equipment or data files. Miller's forces captured intact records showing the locations of every Zorothian military base in 3 star systems, along with detailed information about their defensive capabilities. More importantly, they captured something else. The fortress's communication logs showed desperate messages from Zorothian commanders across the galaxy, all reporting the same thing. Subject species were rebelling. Entire worlds were declaring independence. The empire that had ruled for 1,000 years was collapsing from within. Lieutenant Sarah Murphy analyzed these communications from her position aboard the human command ship. Her tactical reports showed that the psychological impact of human victories was spreading faster than the Zorothians could control. Every time humans won a battle, dozens of alien worlds heard about it within days. Colonel Miller, Murphy reported, "We're seeing uprising activity in over 50 systems. The aliens aren't just fighting us anymore. They're fighting rebellions throughout their own territory." Back on Christos 7, the situation was escalating rapidly. The Zorothian patrol ships had arrived and were demanding that the workers return to the mines immediately. But instead of obeying, thousands of aliens stood their ground in the planet's main square. Commander Johnson watched as Velkan Braxton and Corvani workers linked arms, forming a massive circle around the platform where he stood. The holographic images of human ships destroying Zorathian fleets had shown them that their oppressors could be defeated. The Zorathian patrol leader, Captain Zixtel, transmitted a message to the planet's surface. "Alien workers, return to your duties immediately, or face punishment. The human criminals who have contaminated your mines will be captured and executed." A Braxton miner named Korv stepped forward and spoke into Johnson's translation device. "Zorthian Captain, we will not return to the mines. I've seen that. You can be defeated. We choose freedom." The crowd roared its approval. Beings who had lived in slavery for generations were standing up to their masters for the first time. The psychological revolution that had begun with humanity's first victory was spreading across the galaxy. Major Green contacted Johnson from orbit. "Commander, I'm reading energy buildups in the Zorothian ships. They're preparing to fire on the crowd." Johnson activated his emergency beacon. Within seconds, human ships materialized around the planet. The Freedom's Call and 3 escort vessels had used their advanced stealth systems to position themselves for exactly this situation. Captain Lisa Martinez commanded the Freedom's Call and immediately targeted the Zorathian patrol ships. "Alien vessels, you are ordered to stand down immediately. Any attack on civilian populations will be met with overwhelming force." The Zorathian captain found himself facing the same impossible situation that his colleagues had encountered throughout the war. His 3 patrol ships were outnumbered and outgunned by human vessels that shouldn't have been able to defeat superior Zorathian technology. But the real defeat wasn't military, it was psychological. Captain Zixtel realized that the Empire's authority was gone. The fear that had kept subject species in line for centuries had been replaced by hope. The humans had given every oppressed world in the galaxy something the Zorathians could never take away: the knowledge that their masters could be beaten. The patrol ships retreated without firing a shot. On the planet's surface, the celebration continued for days. Christos VII had declared its independence. Similar declarations were being transmitted from worlds throughout the former empire. Dr. Wright compiled her final report on the psychological collapse of Zorathian authority. The Empire hadn't just lost battles. They had lost the most important weapon any government possessed: the belief among their subjects that resistance was impossible. Captain Danny Ross stood on the bridge of his flagship Thunderstorm as it emerged from hyperspace deep inside Zorathian territory. 6 months had passed since the rebellion began spreading across the galaxy, and now human forces were hunting Zorothian fleets through their own star systems. The aliens who had once attacked Earth with such confidence now fled. Whenever human ships appeared on their sensors, the war had completely reversed. Zorathian commanders who had expected quick victory over a primitive species now found themselves fighting desperately to protect their core worlds. Every week brought news of another system falling to human forces or declaring independence from the crumbling empire. Lieutenant Sarah Murphy worked at the tactical station, analyzing the data streams that flowed in from across the galaxy. Reports showed how thoroughly human warfare had evolved from the desperate improvisation of the early days. What began as creative solutions to impossible problems had become systematic military. It's a doctrine that surpassed anything the aliens had developed in their 1,000-year history. Captain, we're detecting 3 Zorothian battle groups in this system, Murphy reported. 2 are guarding the industrial facilities on Theros Prime. The 3rd appears to be evacuating important personnel from the planet's surface. Ross nodded. Theros Prime was one of the most important Zorothian manufacturing worlds, producing the advanced components that kept their remaining fleets operational. If humans could capture the planet intact, they would deal a devastating blow to the Empire's ability to continue fighting. General Mike Collins led the Liberation Force approaching Theros Prime from 3 different directions. His army included not just human soldiers, but thousands of former Zorothian subjects who had joined the fight for freedom. Velkin fighters, Braxton engineers, Corvani technicians, and dozens of other species worked together under human leadership. The challenge was more complex than simply winning battles. The population of Theros Prime had lived under imperial rule for over 300 years. Many of them had never known any other way of life. Some still believed that Zorathian control was necessary for their survival and prosperity. Collins understood that winning hearts and minds was just as important as winning military victories. His forces carried supplies, medical equipment, and communication devices that would allow the liberated populations to contact their relatives on other worlds. The goal was not to replace Zorathian oppression with human occupation, but to help worlds govern themselves. Engineer First Class Amy Rodriguez had spent months perfecting the integration of technologies from multiple civilizations. Her hybrid designs created warships that combined the best aspects of human creativity: Zorathian energy systems, Velkin stealth technology, and Braxton defensive capabilities. These vessels represented the future of galactic warfare. The assault on Theros Prime began when human stealth ships disabled the planet's orbital defense platforms. The Zorathians had built their defenses to counter conventional attacks, but human tactics were anything but conventional. Instead of approaching from expected vectors, human ships emerged from hyperspace inside the asteroid belt surrounding the planet. Captain Pete Hayes led the main assault force toward the planet's surface. His ships carried Liberation troops in specially designed landing craft that could punch through atmospheric defenses while protecting their passengers from enemy fire. But the real innovation was in what they carried besides soldiers. Each landing craft was equipped with portable communication arrays, medical supplies, and engineering equipment that could repair damaged infrastructure. The humans weren't coming as conquerors, they were coming as liberators who could immediately begin helping the population rebuild their world. The battle for the orbital stations lasted only 2 hours. Zorathian defensive doctrine called for holding fixed positions until reinforcements arrived, but reinforcements weren't coming. The Empire's fleets were scattered across hundreds of star systems, fighting rebellions and retreating from human advances. The garrison on Theros Prime was on its own. Down on the planet's surface, the situation was more complicated.
Ow.
The Zorathian military commander, General Korthaz, had ordered his forces to destroy the industrial facilities rather than let them fall into human hands. But many of the workers in those facilities were alien slaves who saw the approaching human forces as their chance for freedom. Rodriguez monitored the battle from her command ship as human forces advanced through the planet's major cities. Sensors detected something unusual happening in the industrial districts. Instead of the expected resistance, they were finding that many Zorothian installations had already been sabotaged from within. General Collins Rodriguez reported, "The slave workers are disabling Zorothian equipment before we even reach them. They're using our communication broadcasts to coordinate their activities." Collins smiled as he watched the tactical display. This was exactly what made human leadership so effective. Instead of imposing their will through force, humans inspired others to fight for their own freedom. The result was a revolution that spread faster than any army could march. The siege of Fortress Nexus represented the climactic battle for Theros Prime. The massive structure served as the Zorathian Empire's primary military academy, where alien officers had been trained in the tactics and strategies that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Now it was surrounded by the very species those tactics had been designed to defeat. Hayes studied the fortress through his ship's sensors. The structure was built according to classical Zorathian defensive principles, with overlapping fields, a fire, redundant shield generators, and underground bunkers that could withstand orbital bombardment. But like everything else the aliens had built, it was designed to counter conventional attacks. All units, this is Hayes. Begin the unconventional assault. Show them what they never taught in their military academy. The attack came from every direction at once. Human fighters dove through the fortress's defensive fire while Velkin infiltrators moved through ventilation systems that had never been designed to keep out four-armed climbers. Braxton engineers used their natural resistance to energy weapons to approach the main gates under heavy fire, but the most devastating attack came from below. Corvani technicians had spent weeks tunneling beneath the fortress using mining equipment designed for their homeworld's crystal caves. They emerged inside the structure's main power plant and systematically disabled the systems that kept the defenses operational. General Korthas found himself trapped in a fortress that was falling apart around him. His tactical training had prepared him for siege warfare, orbital bombardment, and conventional ground assault. Nothing had prepared him for an enemy that could appear anywhere, use any tactic, and turn his own defensive systems against him. The fortress fell in less than 8 hours. When Hayes accepted the Zorathian surrender, he found that most of the alien officers were in a state of shock. Their entire understanding of military science had been proven wrong by an enemy that refused to follow established rules of warfare. Murphy analyzed the captured intelligence data from Fortress Nexus. The files contained detailed information about every Zorathian military installation in the core systems, along with tactical assessments that showed just how completely the Empire's military leadership had lost confidence in their ability to win the war. General Murphy reported to Collins, according to these files, the Zorathian High Command is considering abandoning their outer territories entirely. They want to concentrate their remaining forces around their homeworld and hope they can negotiate some kind of peace settlement. Collins studied the strategic implications. If the Zorathians retreated to their core systems, it would mean abandoning millions of subject species to govern themselves. The psychological impact would be devastating to whatever remained of Imperial authority. Rodriguez received a priority communication from the human research teams studying captured Zorothian technology. Dr. Helen Jorate's voice came through clearly, despite the interference from the battle zone. Amy, we've made a breakthrough in our analysis of Zorothian neural patterns. Their brain structure actually prevents them from adapting to unexpected situations. They're literally incapable of the kind of flexible thinking that makes humans so effective in warfare. This discovery explained everything about the war's progress. The Zorothians weren't losing because humans were superior beings. They were losing because their own evolution had locked them into rigid thinking patterns that worked well for maintaining a stable empire, but failed completely when faced with creative opposition. The liberation of Theros Prime was completed. Within 3 days, human forces secured the industrial facilities, freed over 2 million enslaved workers, and established a provisional government that included representatives from every species on the planet. But the real victory was psychological. News of the fall of Fortress Nexus spread throughout the galaxy within hours. The military academy that had trained Zorothian officers for centuries had been captured by the same species those officers had been taught to despise. The symbolic impact was devastating to whatever remained of Imperial morale. Hayes stood in the Academy's main lecture hall, where Zorothian cadets had once learned about the superiority of their military doctrine. Admiral Jake Marson stood on the bridge of the Liberty's Edge as his fleet approached Zorothus's prime. The ancient homeworld of the Empire that had once ruled half the galaxy? 18 months of war had led to this moment. The species that had nearly wiped out humanity was now ready to surrender their capital world without a fight. The once mighty Zorothian Empire was finished. Their fleets were scattered or destroyed. Their subject worlds had declared independence. Their military leadership was in hiding. Only their homeworld remained. It's protected by the last functional battle group in their entire civilization. Captain Lisa Stone monitored the communication channels as hundreds of messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Representatives from liberated worlds were sending congratulations and offers of support. Species that had lived in slavery for centuries were celebrating their freedom. Impossible had become reality. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Zorothian homeworld, Stone reported. It's Admiral Vexstar himself. He's requesting permission to discuss surrender terms. Morrison nodded slowly. 3 years ago, Admiral Vexstar had been the supreme commander of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. His fleets had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved billions of beings. Now he was preparing to surrender to the primitive species he had once dismissed as unworthy of notice. The transmission appeared on the main screen. Admiral Vexstar's crystalline features showed the strain of leading a losing war. His once proud uniform was faded, and his voice carried the weight of complete defeat. Admiral Morrison, I request permission to come aboard your vessel to discuss the formal surrender of all remaining Zorothian military forces. Permission granted, Admiral. Morrison replied, Come aboard alone and unarmed. We guarantee your safety. Within an hour, the Zorothian leader was standing in the conference room of the Liberty's Edge, surrounded by the human officers who had orchestrated the destruction of his empire. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The beings he had considered inferior were now dictating terms to him. Dr. Helen Wright observed the surrender negotiations from her position as humanity's chief expert on alien psychology. Her research had proven that the Zorothians were incapable of the flexible thinking that made humans so dangerous in warfare. Now she watched as that same inflexibility made it impossible for them to continue fighting a war they could never win.
Admiral.
Vexstar Morrison began. We're prepared to accept the surrender of all Zorothian military forces, but we need to discuss what happens next. Humanity has no interest in ruling an empire. Vexstar looked confused. In his experience, military victory always led to the conquest and enslavement of the defeated species. The idea that humans would win such a complete victory and then choose not to exploit it was beyond his understanding. Captain Nicole Davis joined the negotiations from her flagship, Defiant Dawn. Her ship represented everything that made human warfare so effective Built from captured alien technology, but designed according to human principles, it was unlike anything that had ever existed in the galaxy. "What are your terms?" Vexstar asked. Morrison consulted the document that had been prepared by representatives from dozens of liberated worlds. The Zorathian Empire is dissolved. All subject species are granted immediate independence. Your remaining military forces will be disarmed, and your weapons technology will be shared with the new galactic community. War crimes tribunals will be established to hold your leaders accountable for centuries of oppression. "And what of my people?" Vexstar asked. "What happens to the Zorathian homeworld? Zorethis' Prime will become an independent world like any other," Morrison replied. "Your people will be free to govern themselves, trade with other worlds, and participate in the new galactic community. But they will never again rule over other species." General Mike Collins participated in the negotiations from Theros Prime, where he was overseeing the establishment of the new planetary government. His voice came through the communication system clearly. "Admiral, we're seeing the same pattern throughout the former empire. When given the choice between continued warfare and peaceful independence, every Zorothian military unit is choosing surrender." The formal surrender ceremony took place aboard the Liberty's Edge with representatives from over 200 worlds in attendance. Species that had been enemies for generations stood together to witness the end of the empire that had oppressed them all. Velkans, Braxons, Corvani, and dozens of other races watched as Admiral Vexstar signed the documents that officially ended. Zorathian military power. Captain Steve Johnson transmitted from Christos 7, where the population was celebrating the formal end of their enslavement. "Admiral, the mining operations here are being converted to civilian use. The workers have elected their own government and are planning to join the new Galactic Liberation Council." The Galactic Liberation Council was humanity's greatest achievement. Instead of replacing Zorothian tyranny with human rule, they had created a democratic organization where every world had an equal voice. Captain Lisa Stone had been chosen to serve as the Council's first coordinator, helping dozens of species learn to work together as equals. Commander Ryan Black reported from the edge of Zorthian space, where his forces were dismantling the last Imperial military installations. "Admiral, we've secured the final weapons depot. All Zorathian military technology has been cataloged and is being distributed to the Council's defense forces." The irony was perfect. The weapons that had once enforced Imperial rule were now being used to protect the freedom of former subjects. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to modify Zorathian equipment for defensive rather than aggressive purposes. Dr. Wright compiled her final analysis of the war's outcome. Her research showed that humanity's greatest advantage had never been superior technology or larger numbers. It was their ability to inspire others to fight for freedom rather than submit to oppression. The Zorothians had ruled through fear, but humans led through hope. Engineer First Class Amy Rodriguez supervised the construction of humanity's first interstellar city. Meeting place where representatives from hundreds of worlds could gather to discuss trade, science, and diplomacy. The city itself was a symbol of cooperation, with each section built using the architectural styles and technologies of different species. The most remarkable aspect of New Haven was that it worked. Species that had been isolated from each other for centuries were now sharing knowledge, establishing trade relationships, and forming friendships. The galaxy was becoming more connected and prosperous than it had ever been under Imperial rule. Colonel Tony Miller established the new Galactic Defense Force, a volunteer military organization designed to protect member worlds from external threats. Unlike the Zorothian military, which existed to conquer and oppress, the Defense Force was dedicated to preserving peace and freedom. Its ranks included soldiers from dozens of species, all trained in the flexible tactics that had proven so effective against rigid military thinking. Captain Danny Ross commanded the first joint patrol mission with Human, Velkan, and Braxon, crews working together aboard ships that represented the best technology of multiple civilizations. These vessels were faster, more powerful, more versatile than anything the Zorothian Empire had ever produced. The transformation of the galaxy was happening faster than anyone had expected. Trade routes that had been controlled by Imperial Monopolies were now open to all species. Scientific research that had been restricted to Zerothian institutions was now shared freely among hundreds of worlds. Technologies that had been hoarded by the Empire were now being improved through collaborative development. Admiral Morrison received reports from across the galaxy showing the progress of reconstruction. Former slave worlds were establishing their own governments, building schools and hospitals, and reconnecting with relatives they had been separated from for generations. The psychological healing would take time, but the process had begun. The final irony came in a report from Dr. Right about the Zerothian homeworld itself, freed from the burden of maintaining their empire. The Zorothian people were discovering aspects of their own culture that had been suppressed for centuries. Artists, philosophers, and scientists who had been forced to serve the military were now free to pursue their own interests, Admiral Wright reported. We're seeing something remarkable on Zerothis's prime. Without the pressure to maintain imperial control, the Zerothian people are becoming more creative and flexible in their thinking. They're starting to contribute to galactic science and culture in ways that would have been impossible under their old system. Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Liberty's Edge, looking out at the stars that now represented a galaxy of free worlds rather than conquered territories. Earth, which had been facing extinction just 3 years ago, had become the center of the largest peaceful coalition in galactic history. The war was over. But the real victory was just beginning. Humanity had proven that even the most powerful empire could be defeated by species willing to fight for their freedom. More importantly, they had shown that military victory could lead to something better than another empire.